welcome to DIY Therapy. As always, we'll start with a disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with your medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. My name is Will. With me, as always, is Andy.
What's up, Will?
Good morning.
What's going on?
Oh, just getting ready for... I got a whole honeydew list of things to do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. We got to run all over.
I'm recovering from that wild Christmas party we had last night. Got out of control, let me tell you.
That happens at Christmas parties. I mean, not the one you were at, but...
No, not the one I was at.
And I was only,
Well, I've heard your stories, which are not G-rated at this on this podcast. So,
no, we're not rated for that.
No. So today we are talking about knee pain and specifically meniscus tears, right?
Yes.
And so, I think one of the big questions that people a lot of times have in regards to meniscus tears are, what is it? Okay. What is the function of the meniscus? Obviously some of the ways that you can damage it, some of the symptoms that are associated with it, and then furthermore, how do we treat that, both from a conservative standpoint and then from maybe a little bit more aggressive, like injections, all the way to surgery. So I think just starting off a little bit with what the meniscus is. It's a fibrocartilaginous, I can't speak, type of tissue. A lot of times, many joints have a certain cartilage, which is basically a buffer between the two joints. This is kind of an extra buffer in between the knees. And its real function in general is to disperse force between the tibia, which is the main lower leg bone. Yeah, the shin bone, good. And then also the femur, which is the upper leg bone.
The thigh? The
thigh, yes. We're really dumbing it down today, aren't we? Shin, thigh, those two bones together, that's where this is at. And so, there's, I think one important thing to kind of understand about just really all injuries is that the more blood flow that's associated with a specific structure, the quicker and easier it's going to heal. And so what the research will tell us is basically before the ages of about 18, you still have a fairly decent blood supply to the meniscus. So there is a meniscal injury. There is kind of a central blood supply that does occur to the meniscus where that meniscus can heal to some extent. As we get more into adulthood, as we continue to move forward with our lives and aging in the simple aging process, what we'll find is that the blood flow is almost non-existent, becoming more avascular, meaning no blood flow, and then anything that has fewer amount of blood flow is going to then have a much more difficult time healing, and in the case of meniscus, probably will not heal on its own. And so that's something that's always a little discouraging for people who are over the age of 20 or so, 18, 20. And so that's kind of where people are at, and they get fairly discouraged when they hear, hey, I do have a meniscus tear. Anything to add on that?
No, that all sounds right. Well, obviously it is right, but it's...
Sounds right. Sure. Sounds like you didn't make that up today.
Congratulations.
Can't say that I don't ever do that, but whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. At least that bit of it is. It's when I usually when people think about cartilage, at least they think about the stuff that's like if you eat a chicken wing and you pop it open, it's the glossy bit that's in between the joint. That's what they kind of think of. Mm-hmm. This is almost like. I mean, it's rough, tough stuff. That's it's not solid like that, but it's more rubbery in a way.
A little more pliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's why it can rip
so
and tear.
like if we go back to like the cartilage, like most of the time when people will, if you start to get X-rays, especially in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you start to hear people or the X-rays say, yeah, there's mild, moderate, severe degeneration, arthritic changes. That's really more looking at like the cartilage aspect, which is still kind of the gapping between the bones. And again, this is an extra piece of that fibrocartilaginous kind of mixture that is in the knee. So it's kind of a unique. There's other meniscus is actually within the body, like in the TMJ joint, the temporomandibular joint. There's a meniscus.
Ooh.
So there's other structures that have this, but they're fewer and farther between versus just the standard joint. And they're more at risk because they're such a it's such a loaded joint. Okay.
And what you do with your feet and knees that will affect that, because you're not making quick moves with your jaw.
No, not typically.
At least not body weight wise.
Yes. And so, a lot of the kind of the next step is, okay, well, what is a typical cause of a meniscal injury? Sometimes it can be like deep squats. Sometimes it can be getting up and down from like your knees. You're more at risk with this, obviously, when you get a little bit older. Sometimes it can be, a lot of times it's pivoting, twisting, really quick cuts, especially at deeper knee angles. If you have other structural injuries to the knee, such as a medial ligament issue, which is a ligament on the inside of the knee, and one of the main structural components that keeps the knee nice and stable. That ligament actually attaches to the inner portion of the meniscus. So if you have some damage to that, it could cause some meniscal problems. But usually the true mechanism of injury is, some type of twisting, cutting, maybe even like stepping into a hole that you didn't realize was there. Or sometimes people even say, stepping off of a curb or a step that you thought was either higher or lower, and all of a sudden you get this kind of jolting feeling through your whole
we've all had that where you forget the step is there, or you take a step and it's just like, ah. Yeah.
So those are usually like the mechanisms of injury, so to speak. Certainly there can be some wear and tear. In fact, there's more acute, which is like that, and then there's more chronic, where there's simply a wear and tear component of the meniscus that just kind of slowly wears down, just like any other joint that is deemed arthritic. There's just that joint has been used, and it starts to thin, and therefore then there starts to become some tears or micro traumas that occur within the meniscus also. So.
Because it doesn't heal, because we all getting older.
Yeah, and you'll find that, there's a lot of wear and tear that starts to happen more in our 40s, 50s, and 60s because of the fact that it doesn't get older, which, eventually could lead to some type of surgery. It could eventually lead to injections. Typically, when we start talking about, knee meniscus, the big question is, okay, can we treat it from a conservative standpoint, or do we have to go to specific interventions that are going to be like a little more aggressive injections in arthroscopic surgery where they clean it up, maybe a disc basically a disc accession. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, they're just gonna remove it.
Yeah, there you go. To me, that's more for the spine. I can't think of the term right now. But so what they do is they would just cut it out. And then there's certain times when people are young enough where they actually may try to repair it, where they'll actually try to, like suture it back together because they believe there's a solid enough blood flow to where that can heal. That's really only going to be maybe 25 years and younger. Typically, they'll just remove it in any type of arthroscopic surgery, and the hope is that then, normal knee function kind of moves along. But typically there are quite a few different types of tears. For this podcast, it's a little outside of kind of the scope of what type of tear. But even if you have a tear, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have any kind of surgery. There are some conservative options.
It depends on the severity.
Typical like symptoms that one might experience with a meniscal injury?
Obviously pain.
Pain, swelling.
Pain, Pain, swelling. There might be a bit of clicking. Your knee might lock. It might give a feeling of giving out, which is I feel like that one's a weird one because you can get that with any sort of random knee pain. So, but I feel like the clicking and locking are the two kind of big tells for a meniscus tear.
Buckling is another term that is used when it's giving out. That usually occurs like when it's the knee's at a little deeper bend. Sometimes it may feel like it actually goes into like a little bit of hyperextension, which means it overstretches when it's straight. I think
overstretches when overstraightens when it's straight. I don't know.
Overstraightening?
I don't know. Overstretches when it's straight. Overstraightens when it's straight.
You lost me. We'll just say yes. But that's typical pivoting. I think pivoting is one that again, it's a mechanism of injury, but then also brings on a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Some tests are where you can actually like stand on one leg and try to twist a bit. And if you have severe pain deep inside the knee, that's a lot of times indicative that there's a meniscal injury that has occurred. So I think, that really covers the gambit of it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of other things that happen with the knee.
Did you say cover the gambit?
Yeah, it's
gambit, right? Not gambit. A gambit is like a ploy you're trying to do.
Gamut.
Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you, grammar, please. On the podcast, it might not have been clear enough. They may have just overlooked it, but now they know I'm an idiot.
I could edit this out, but I'm not going to.
No, you're not. Yeah, and I don't have the skills for that. So
you can always learn. Anyway.
Yeah. So I think so swelling, twisting, buckling, obviously pain. What I was going to say before I was so rudely interrupted by Will making fun of me.
It was rude.
Was that there are other syndromes in the knee that sometimes can have similar symptoms. So it's always important to try to get a good diagnosis if you are talking to your healthcare professional. When we do talk about diagnosis, an MRI is really what's going to be kind of that gold standard for diagnosis for this. An X-ray is going to tell you a little bit of joint spacing, whether or not there's any thinning there of the meniscus, but it's not going to tell you whether or not there's a tear. So sometimes I'll do an X-ray originally just to kind of rule out any other, anything else that's more sinister, fractures, giant bone spurs, things of that nature.
I did a sinister laugh.
That's the best I can do.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah. So then you go through the whole treatment process. Conservative treatment is going to be, gentle range of motion. It's going to be activity modification, continuing to identify, what it is that is really bringing on your pain. Whether it is deep knee bends, well, maybe you need to put an extra cushion underneath the couch if your couch is really low, and every time you get up out of your couch, that hurts. So maybe some activity modification. If it's stairs, you maybe do one step at a time to avoid that knee pain. It could be that, getting down on your hands and knees is difficult, so maybe you avoid gardening and different types of activities that might involve that right now. So sometimes it's just activity modification and really identifying those things that agitate it, obviously taking a little bit of time when you're turning and pivoting, instead of pivoting on that limb, you're going to turn and kind of pick up those feet. And then ice obviously, the whole RICE concept, which is what? Rest, ice, compression, elevation.
Yeah.
So rest a lot of times is, kind of that avoidance concept. But then we get more into, so then through a conservative standpoint, as the symptoms would calm down, we would get more into, okay, let's now push our range of motion. Let's now try to strengthen the joint so that we can get some more stability in that area. And then slowly introduce the activities that were agitating it and try to build up a resilience and tolerance at lower levels, and then continue to kind of systematically stair step and build that up. So that would be more of the conservative aspect of it. So, simple exercises early on that can help just kind of get the leg moving would be like your simple quad sets. We've put some exercises in some of our posts before about this.
I can try to link to some of these.
Yeah, straight leg raise, simple heel slides, not pushing through a ton of pain. things of that nature. Maybe if you are having some pains in standing, maybe you do some heel toe rocking in a standing position just to try to kind of normalize that weight bearing and weight acceptance through the knee. But then we kind of get more to the aggressive stuff, which is, like the injections. And I don't know, you want to talk anything about the injections, Will?
I've never had one.
There? What's that?
I've never had one.
Oh, good. Yet.
Yeah. I have scheduled mine, which
Have you?
I'm totally excited about.
Yeah, sounds like it. So you love needles.
That's why I'm never getting a tattoo.
The injections would be to just kind of, I always look at it as it's something to just really calm down that tissue. And
decrease the inflammation, the swelling.
Yep, decrease the inflammation, swelling, and then, just kind of just take the edge off, so to speak, so that maybe we can tolerate exercises a little bit more. And
if we can remove some of the swelling, that'll help reduce some of the pain, which will allow you to do more things.
Sidebar, by the way, I had a patient just the other day tell me that she was talking to her orthopedic surgeon, who just did a knee replacement with her, and she was telling me that they, in January, and we've got to take this for what it's worth, that there's going to be a new injection that's actually being released that is time released. So and I don't know. I'm going to have to do some more research on that. That would be very interesting because that could possibly allow people to have longer periods of having no pain, and that way they can continue to introduce activities, and hopefully that sensitivity of the tissue drops a bit. Don't know much about that. Maybe we'll have a future podcast about that when we learn more about that and the options on that.
Yeah.
We'll have to dig into that a little bit more. And then, of course, the last option would be your arthroscopic surgery, which is going to be more aggressive. It can be anywhere. Recovery could be anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. Sometimes people come into the clinic a week later and are literally dancing. They're feeling fantastic. And then sometimes people come in and from a pain management standpoint, we're really trying to get them to get to where they need to be. And, it's 6-8 weeks that we're working with them. Yeah. And then obviously sometimes the surgery can not to be Debbie Downer here, but the surgery can sometimes not be effective also. So it can really run along that entire spectrum, of, hey, it worked magically, or it wasn't very effective. I think the other thing that's important to understand too, if you are looking at trying to get surgery, the research does indicate that the stronger the joint is prior to having that surgery, the better the outcomes are and the quicker the recovery. So, it pays to put in a little bit of effort, energy in terms of some generalized strengthening to that knee, to those structures prior to the surgery. And that may allow you to have a better outcome or recover quicker to get to the things that you want to, get to and do.
Yep. Always stronger. Better be stronger than weaker.
Yep. And then the last piece of that is, let's say that you go all the way through that arthroscopic surgery and it's still terrible. It didn't work. You're not having any success with further therapy, further conservative treatment. You've tried the injections. You've checked all of those things off the list. The last and most aggressive treatment is what, Will?
They're going to cut it off? Cut the leg
knee
off?
Replacement.
Yeah.
Knee replacement.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Where we're going. That's where we're going with knee replacement. So that's usually in our older population. Someplace, they really try not to do a lot of knee replacements before the ages of 55. It's usually the cutoff is probably 63, 64, 65. If you're in your 50s, it may be something that your doc is telling you, hey, try to put this off as long as possible because they don't want that joint to wear out. We were just having a conversation about this the other day with a couple of patients.
We were. Yeah.
And there's some knees that, promote that they're lifetime, some that say about 30 years. It's all going to depend on what you want to do. If you're a 50-year-old man, woman that is still wanting to jog and bike and do all these really high-level activities, that joint is going to wear out a little bit faster, okay? So depending on what your
it's a lot of it's your activity level, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, like a perfect example is you, Will, right? Like you're in your late 30s, we'll say, to be nice,
to be generous.
you have some severe arthritis going on in your hip, and Will's looking at potential options. And first thing Doc says to him is that, hey, you don't want a hip replacement at 40. You want to try to put it off as long as possible.
When she told me that, I was like, well, duh.
Did she know you were a therapist when you went through that?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, all right. So, but I don't know. That's anything else? I mean,
no. I mean, besides the fact that if you do get the surgery where they remove bits of it, your likelihood of getting a knee replacement, a full one, is increased.
Yeah, down the line.
Yeah.
But
other than that, yeah.
I mean, and I think the other thing to talk about, which we didn't touch a lot on here, is really that conservative treatment. There is some research that will, especially some research that indicates that, you're almost, you can get the majority of people through conservative treatment, if done correctly and are consistent with it, can have really good results. And so the surgery isn't necessarily something that you want to jump straight into, especially if you have fear of that type of fear and anxiety for that type of thing. And there, if you truly have a something that's really affecting your daily life, get into a good therapist, talk to them, have them just kind of lay out some of the options that they want you to go with, and a lot of times much of that pain can be managed, maybe not completely taken away, but much of that pain through your daily activities can be managed once you go through some of that conservative treatment and try to kind of desensitize and calm down the area.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is just managing your pain, realizing what causes it to, like we always talk about, what causes the pain to increase, and try to modify as possible.
Mm-hmm. All right, anything else? You just went and saw Spider-Verse, right?
Yes, Spider-Verse. Henry? Yes, I took my 4-year-old to it.
Wait, now was Henry as into it as you? Because for those of you that haven't heard our podcast before, Will is very into comics.
I haven't bought a comic in I don't know how many years.
Yeah, but with the Marvel movies and stuff, you haven't had to.
No, well,
right?
No, I'm getting that weird little fix on that sort of stuff through this.
Yeah.
It was a 2-hour movie, and it held his attention through the whole time. And it was, the beginning part of it is, I don't want to say slow, but it was it was kind of pacing, and then when things start to hit the fan, it go. So I mean, it held his attention real well. I was a little worried because there are bits and pieces that are kind of really scary. Like even the music in those parts almost are reminiscent of like a horror movie.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. And he hung tough, huh?
Well, if it's something he's interested in, it doesn't bother him. But all of a sudden, his sisters want to watch him. They're like, I don't want to watch that. It's scary. Like, it's not scary. You just don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend it. You might want to see it if you have young children, to see it before, just to see assess if the kid would be appropriate for it. But there wasn't any language issues. There wasn't any other sort of like things that I've thought. It just like from a purely scary bit, it might be.
And from a visual standpoint, it was gorgeous, right?
It was amazing. It was amazing how they because it doesn't look like anything that is out there. It's just the way that they combined CGI and hand drawn, and there's little there's little bits of like just kind of like comic book things in them, like when Spider-Man flips out his web, there's a tiny little word balloon by it that says "thwip." And there's a bit of it in a trailer where older Spider-Man and new Spider-Man, Miles Morales, are walking. They're running, and they get into this lunchroom where there's a bunch of scientists, and they're all like acting casual, and they're grabbing a bagel, and all the scientists like grab stuff, and they all have weapons, and they start running. And then they turn around, and one of them throws the bagel at like one of the scientists, and you just see right above where it hits them, it just says bagel.
Nice.
There are little things like that.
I'm
that
going
are
to see
fun.
if my 7-year-old daughter wants to go to it, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to convince her. Only because I want to go to it. Yes, selfish parent over here.
I think that visually it will hold her interest.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's wrap this up. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I got nothing. All right.
Yeah, I'm kind of boring.
Well, we're busy this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why their podcasts have been a little sporadic.
Yep.
This podcast was for educational purposes only. It is not designed to diagnose or treat. When beginning any exercise program, it should be reviewed and discussed with a medical professional prior to beginning. Information on this podcast is not designed to replace medical treatment. Remember, treat yourself.